Welcome back to Intro to Physical Anthropology. I'm your instructor, David Leitner, and this time we're going to talk about language, the evolution of language, the role it plays, the important role it plays in human evolution, and how the brain actually sort of produces language, what happened to the brain in order to allow all of this. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, as I've mentioned before, language is a biocultural trait. We're born with the capacity to acquire languages, to produce coherent speech and understand speech. We have also piggybacked other abilities on top of this, like reading and writing. That themselves were not evolved, but took advantage of other evolved capabilities that we have. But what is language itself? The simplest definition would be that it is the unique system of communication used by members of the human species. Okay? Although that doesn't really clarify much. It is unique. In the animal kingdom, we do not see other creatures that communicate using language. We see communication systems that can be incredibly complex, but they aren't language for the following reason. Language requires these three components. Language is phonemic, it is grammatical, and it is spoken. Although not always. So, what do I mean by phonemic? Well, phonemes are a fancy word that linguists use for the most basic units of sound that the human voice can make. Every language has a different range of these sounds. No language uses all of the possible sounds that humans can make. These are not letters. These are not syllables. These are even shorter than that. Take the word cat. It's a single syllable, 3 letters. And it has 3 phonemes in it. K, a, t. Cat. K, a, t. 3 sounds, 3 phonemes, 1 word. These sounds, when strung together, have symbolic meanings. That is, there's no logical relationship between their form and their meaning. So there's no, the word tree really has nothing to do with a tree. There is nothing tree-like about the sound tree, and there's no reason we couldn't use arbre, which is the French, or I'm forgetting the German for it right now, but regardless, there are lots of different sounds we can use. Even the sounds we use to mimic other sounds are different from language to language. In English, dogs go woof woof, in German they go vau vau. Right? Now, it's not that the dog sound changes, it's that the linguistic signifier of that sound changes. In addition, phonemes don't have to be words. They're not restricted to words. They can be, the one I abuse the most is the phoneme So, I'm sure you're all annoyed with that. I certainly am watching these videos. I'm trying to get rid of it, I swear. But little linguistic interjections that don't have the same kind of meaning as words, although they can include words like dude, can have lots of different meanings, right? But all sorts of sounds are phonemic. A language has to be grammatical. What do I mean by grammatical? I mean there are implicit rules about how you can appropriately string sounds together to make meaningful utterances. Okay? Take, for example, rules around how to arrange the subject, the object, and the verb in a sentence so that it is meaningful. She, him loves makes very little sense in English, but she loves him makes perfect sense. That said, she, him, loves make perfect sense in Sanskrit, Latin, Japanese, and a whole bunch of other languages. In fact, actually 45% of all languages use this rule. Subject, object, verb. Okay? And you can see all the other sort of arrangements of this on this chart here. You have subject, verb, object, like English. You have verb, subject, object. You have verb, object, subject, verb, subject, and finally, less than 1% of languages have object, subject, verb. Him, she loves. Now, all of these are meaningful, but only, all of these arrangements are meaningful, but only in the correct language. And that is a trait of languages, is they have these implicit rules. Now, I'm using words we've developed to describe language, but, for the most part, language, these rules are mostly unspoken. Most people who speak the language don't really understand, or will have a hard time explaining the correct way to speak that language to you, what those rules actually are, unless they've learned some rules at school. They're usually implicit. Finally, spoken. Okay, in order to be spoken, language, and I'm only focusing, I am very aware there are languages that don't require speech, and I want to emphasize this. In terms of the evolution of language, though, although some early languages might have been sign languages, perhaps, we don't have clear evidence of that. And we do have clear evidence of changes in evolution to the pharyngeal area and the larynx that allow for speech, and at a high cost, I should add. We are specialized in this sense. We have a specialized airway that allows us solely, its sole purpose is to allow the production of a wide range of sounds that we can use as speech. Some of these changes. I've got a chimpanzee on the left and a human on the right here. One of the changes is that the nasal cavity expands greatly, creating a better resonating chamber. Another big change is that the tongue actually becomes shorter, but attaches further down the throat. The hard palate moves forward a bit, and the soft palate, instead of being blocked off by the epiglottis, as you can see here on the chimp, has this wide open space. So this epiglottis is here in the chimp to prevent it from swallowing food down its airway here, down the trachea. If you do that, you choke and you die, right? Unless somebody can save you. So whenever food goes through the mouth, it pushes the epiglottis down, the epiglottis blocks off the airway, and you can swallow safely, resting comfortably, knowing that you will not choke. Our larynx extended considerably, but the epiglottis did not. And so every time we swallow food, we risk dying. Every time. We might be the only mammal that happens to. That's a huge cost in evolutionary terms, isn't it? To say, well, I'm going to make all these changes that are going to actually cause more deaths and take more people out of the gene pool. So the trade-off has to be pretty good. In fact, actually, we see these changes occur not just sort of in evolution, we see them occur during development. An infant, after they are born, has a throat and airway passage that looks much more like a chimpanzee. Their epiglottis does shut when they swallow, which is why they you don't typically get suckling babies choking on that. But as they grow older, and usually by about the age of 2, the placement of the anatomy in the airway is such that they can begin producing speech sounds. In fact, actually, it's clear, there's a lot of research that babies can understand the spoken word before they can produce it. And their understanding always precedes their ability to produce. Okay, so this huge benefit we're talking about is because it's a carrier of culture. It passes on knowledge as well as other things. We are not the only creatures to have culture, though, so it's not necessary for culture. We know that many primates exhibit cultural behaviors where particular tool uses or the things they make tools out of will vary from place to place, not for any discernible reason. Like, it's not that the materials aren't available in one but are available in the other. It's just stylistic choices. But other animals don't require quite as heavily on culture as we do to survive. In fact, actually deprived of other people, although it will cause great harm to other primates because we're all social creatures, but it is, humans have an especially cruel way of inflicting violence on each other, which is to eradicate others' cultures, to systematically deprive them of their cultural heritage. Don't believe me? Look it up. There's some really interesting work in psychology as well as sociology, history, anthropology about this. We aren't exactly sure why, like what the precise benefit of language is. We know, other than we know it carries culture, but like I said, it's not necessary in order to carry culture. Robin Dunbar, though, an anthropologist in England, suggested that language is an adaptation to larger group size, and that we developed language as a replacement for grooming as our groups became too large to effectively engage in grooming with all the members of the group so that you can maintain close ties with everybody. In other words, language was a more effective way of bonding with people. And some experiments he's done show that 65% of the time, worldwide, he didn't just do this in England, he did it all over the world. And when people are having conversations, about 65% of the time, they are talking about other people, not themselves. 65% of the time. So it seems like, at least today, the majority of what language is used for is gossip. What we might call gossip. Think about that. Why would that be an advantage? Why would that be an advantage? Well, because it's a way of keeping tabs on the social realities around you. And what people are thinking and what they might be motivating them makes you better at surviving in a group. It allows you to pass on information, yes, but it also allows you to get inside the minds of other people. Even if it's false gossip, it still gives you some sense of what is going on in the world. I'm not saying it's a good thing, gossip, but it certainly played an important role in our evolution. Now, we're not alone, we think, in terms of possessing language. We can't say for sure that Neanderthals had language, but it would be very surprising if they didn't. The evidence is very strong. Some of the anatomical evidence is that they are the only other animal that has a floating hyoid bone like ours, the same shape as ours. You can see this Neanderthal shape here has this sort of U shape with a nice flat front. It is shaped very similarly to the human ones here. Okay, this whole bottom row is human. And that means that they had the muscle attachments to produce a wide variety of sounds. Okay. In addition, we know from genomic analysis that they possess the same version of the FOXP2 gene that we have. No other mammals have this version of the FOXP2 gene. No other animals have it. And what it does for us is it helps coordinate the development of the nerves and the anatomy, the development of the anatomy that allows speech to happen, that coordinates all of this together. It's not the only one, but it's an important one because it's one that other animals don't possess. But we share this in common with them. Now, the implication from that, of course, that we can draw from that is that unless the highly unlikely event that we evolved the same version of the FOXP2 gene separately, it's most likely that we had a common ancestor that possessed this FOXP2 version. So language might predate our last common ancestor with Neanderthals. That's going back quite a ways. Okay. Speech, there are lots of centers in your brain involved in speech. But two main ones, particularly for the production of fluent speech and the understanding of speech, are Wernicke's area and Broca's area. Broca's area is more involved in production of speech. Wernicke's area is more involved in understanding speech. Notice that Wernicke's area is near the auditory cortex. And how do you receive speech? Okay, through the ears. Now, we've known about these two areas for more than a century. And the initial research on them was prompted by the fact that the discoverers noticed that people having particular kinds of speech problems, when they did autopsies on them, would have lesions in one of these areas or in the tissues that connect them. And interestingly enough, the nature of the speech disruption, or aphasia, as it's called, varies depending on where along that connection the lesion is. If it's closer to Wernicke's area, it's going to look more like problems understanding speech. If it's more to Broca's area, it may be more to do with the production of speech, or somewhere in between. I want to give you a taste of this, though, right now. This is a gentleman this is a video from an aphasia charity group, and a group that works with men and women with various forms of aphasia. This is Broca's aphasia, or non-fluent aphasia. He is going to be able to produce understandable speech, but it won't be fluid. It will be difficult. He will be stuttering. It will be somewhat unconnected. So I want you to listen to this for a little bit.
Can you tell us your name?
Mike Caputo.
And Mike, when was your stroke?
I was 7 years ago.
Okay.
And
what did you used to do?
Worked Autodesk, sales, and worldwide, and very good. Yeah.
Okay. And who are you looking at over there when you turn your head?
That's my wife.
Okay. And why is she helping you to talk?
She's a speech.
So you have trouble with your speech?
Yeah.
And what's that called?
Aphasia.
And Dr.
I'll leave it there. You can watch the rest of the video online if you like. Hey, keep going. Okay. So as you can see, there's nothing intellectually wrong with this person. I want to, this is not what's going on. He has had a stroke. The stroke was in an area near Broca's area. It interrupted his ability to produce speech fluidly. The words are there, but they're not coming. And it takes him a while, as you can see. And the more complex the response is, the more difficult that becomes. So now on the opposite end of this area, we've got Wernicke's area, right? And with Wernicke's aphasia, you produce fluent speech, but it's nonsense. It makes sense to him. The words he's choosing words in his head, but the words coming out to us sound like nonsense. They aren't the same words that we would use at all. And but he does it very fluently. So his ability to use language is there, but his ability to draw the meaningful words into it is not. So let me show you this.
Hi, Byron. How are you?
I'm happy. Are you pretty? You look good.
What are you doing today?
We stayed with the water over here at the moment and talked with the people for them over there. They're diving for them at the moment. They'll save in the moment. He'll have water very soon for him. With luck for him.
So we're on a cruise and we're about to
We
get to
will
Juneau.
store it right here and they'll save their hands right there for them.
And what were we just doing with the iPad?
Right at the moment, they don't show a darn thing.
With the iPad that we were doing. Like here?
I'd like my change for me and change hands for me. It would happen. I would talk with Donna sometimes. We're out with them. Other people are working with them. I'm very happy with them.
Good.
This girl was very good and happy. And I play golf and hit other trees. We play out with the hands. We save a lot of hands on hold for us, other hands. I don't know what you get, but I talk with a lot of hand for him. Sometime. Am I talk of any more to saying?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope the world lasts for you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Quite like Byron. So there again, so you can see he is producing fluent speech. The ability to sort of put things together, use that grammatical process is there, but the actual words, the meanings of them to us don't match up to what he is trying to say. There's some connection, right? There's some. You can try to make out what he's meaning, but that's after a lot of work. Okay. Also, sometimes there are sort of issues with understanding speech as well. Now, the thing about conduction aphasias, these are the aphasias that occur between these two areas, is that they will lead to some variation where there's a combination of these issues in some way, depending on how close to either Broca's area or Wernicke's area it is. So these are so important because they led to the first recognition that there were specific networks in the brain for language. That was one of them. And that it wasn't just one area in the brain. It actually, that language as a capacity in the brain spread over many different areas. So it's like lots of little places were hijacked to evolve this. It is an example of an ability that is lateralized. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, lateralization is just the tendency of an area of the brain to be on one side and not the other. Interestingly, there's lateralization is consistent for most of us. So in most of us, Broca's and Wernicke's area are on the left side of the brain, but in a small percentage of people, it's reversed. Their brains are not backwards, but they're flipped. So that the stuff on the left side is on the right and the stuff on the right is on the left. Very interesting. And this comes down to little changes during development in the womb. Actually, before that, sort of as embryos. There are a few other sort of lateralized areas. So, for instance, the ability to understand and produce rhythm of speech is right next to the area that handles musical rhythm. Okay, and that's on the right hemisphere. So it's no coincidence that they're both there, because this quality of speech we call prosody has to do with rhythm, right? What most likely happened is that a piece of that rhythm center was hijacked for this purpose and began to specialize just in speech pattern. Reading is not an evolved ability, right? We did not evolve that ability. Reading's an example of one where we actually create the center for it. And the center that lights up is this one back here that I've circled. It's around that area, near the visual association area. It is a special subset of our visual processing that then connects to the rest of the language networks. Reading is only about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. I can't remember the exact date right off the top of my head. I'll be honest. It's new. It's brand new, and it developed overnight. So, it wasn't that a group of people suddenly evolved these little centers in their brain. No, these come up as you learn to read. They form as you learn to read. Again, your behavior, your culture is altering the shape of your brain. And this comes to one of my final points here, which is that the brain is highly plastic. It is an amazing organ. It is very delicate. It is the consistency of Jell-O, okay, which is why you need to be careful about hitting your head or being exposed to loud explosions and the like. It's easy to damage, but it's also very capable of altering in response to the environment, in response to your behavior, in response to others' behaviors. It can even, to some degree, reroute around some kinds of damage to sort of restore some limited function to certain areas. The structure adapts, and genetics gives us the ability to do that, but it doesn't dictate the structure itself completely. That is formed through interaction with other people and the environment around us. So, I want to bring it all together here. Language required millions of years to develop, okay? Potentially at least 1 million. I suspect it's even older than that. Complex adaptations, radical anatomical adaptations, some of which have made us more susceptible to choking on our food. Neurological changes that coordinate not only the activation of the physical capabilities, but also coordinating all the complex movements involved. Developmentally, our brains are adapted to acquire these things from other people, okay? And we are highly specialized in that sense. No other animal has this language acquisition capability, either as babies or any other time. That is uniquely human and profound. I think. What's the payoff? More efficient cooperation, replaces grooming for social bonding. It becomes a vehicle for the transmission of culture. And the result is more than either just nature or nurture. What we've got is an encultured brain. Your brain is encultured. It is a biocultural organ for a biocultural organism. Thank you very much for joining me again. Have a great week, and I will see you again soon.